her that real experience of a real person who had Down syndrome. Any other questions? Well, I love urban fantasy, but my original training, which is why I was skeptical, which it was writing hard science fiction, or well, space opera with hard science fiction tweaks to it. But recently I've fallen in love with steampunk, which is sort of the whole idea that Jules Verne and H.G. Wells were right, and that the world they imagined came to pass, and then we're telling stories in it. So I have a novel that is coming out from the same publisher as Frost Moon, Blood, Rock, and Liquid Fire. It's going to be called Jeremiah Willstone and the Clockwork Time Machine. We hope it's coming out later this year, if I can get the edits back to them. And for the last segment, I would like to read a little bit of the not yet published novel, Jeremiah Willstone and the Clockwork Time Machine, starting with chapter 1. It's never a bad time for goggles. Lightning gouged a chunk of wainscoting an inch from Jeremiah Willstone's head, and she hurled herself backwards down the stair, bumping from tread to tread in her tailcoat, firing both cathode straws again and again until the oak door panels were blasted into sparks and splinters. Her shoulders hit the second floor landing hard enough to rattle her teeth, but Jeremiah didn't lose her grip. She just kept both guns trained in that cracked attic door atop the narrow service stairwell, watching foxfire shimmer up its hinges and knobs. But as crackling green tracers crept glowing around the flame, she realized with horror the door was reinforced with newly added iron bands. She'd intended to blast the thing apart and deny her hidden enemy cover, but it just created more arrow holes for her to shoot through. Jeremiah muttered a curse. The doors weren't supposed to be reinforced. The Newfoundland Airship Conservatory was a relic of a bygone era, a mammoth Queen Anne revival mansion attached to an enormous crystal hangar, both over a half a century old, and electric pistols had barely been invented when it was built in the 1850s, much less Faraday armor. Yet this lot of miscreants had managed to erect in a few days barriers proof to the most modern thermionic blasters. She should have known, since this elegant relic of more dignified time had been built, the world had changed. The world had been forced to, once monsters from foreign worlds were lured to Earth by the distinctive signature of etheric weapons that had made war so civilized. Now metals could be whittled, and mechanicals could move like men and women, enabling a small human force to quickly lay fortifications elaborate enough to slow on a full-on incursion of foreign monsters. As the foxfire dissipated, the crackling continued, and Jeremiah's eyes flicked aside to see sparks escaping the broken glass of her left cathode and straws vacuum tubes. Its thermionics were shot, so she tossed the etheric gun aside with a curse and checked the charge canister and her remaining cathode and straw. The little brass bead was hovering between 3 and 4 notches. Briefly, she thought of swapping canisters, but a slight creak upstairs refocused her attention. No, you only need 3 shots. Keep them in. Wait for reinforcements. Jeremiah grimaced. She had never before had her own tools turned on herself. Outer gates reinforced with brass-like tubing, compound walls reinforced with quick-spun barbed wire, and a historic building to boot, prompting the Newfoundland Air Authorities to hold up her air support. Even her legendary ground tactics, assaulting her foes faster than they expected along routes they never anticipated, had been thwarted. Fortifications in the smugglers' tunnels, cameras in the corridors, remotely coordinated resistance, even these attic stairs had guards. In fact, in over 9 years as an expeditionary fighting the madmen and madwomen who allied themselves with the foreign monsters trying to gain a foothold in the earth, she'd never encountered a force as well prepared as Lord Christopherson's. That stood to reason. The man had been a pillar in the Victorian Defense League, devising many of the tactics that made up their repertoire. But his reasoning, that was obscure. Why would such a man steal an airship, raid an arsenal, and go rogue? Light shifted in the holes of the shattered door above. Jeremiah cursed. There was cover to the left and right. The moment she rolled, she'd likely get shot in the back. Well, as she kicked backward and levered herself up on the wall of the landing, she was pinned. How had it come to this? They all wanted to believe Lord Christopherson had stolen the ZR-101 prototype airship as part of some clever scheme to save the world. But the evidence was mounting that this was a military expedition being bankrolled by the restorationists, who threatened not just the crown, but the liberation Jeremiah held so dear. Of course, given her history with the man, she shouldn't have found his shift in allegiance surprising. With a complete lack of women soldiers among his footnotes, confirmed he put his politics into practice. Lord Christopherson wanted to upend the Victorian order, and with his strategic mind, political backing, and invisible airship, mounted with God knows what weaponized horror he'd stolen from the arsenal of madness, he'd have a fair shot at doing it. So Jeremiah had to stop him before he escaped with that airship and that weapon. At last, aid. Lieutenant Patrick Carpenter dashed around the corridor into the landing, then yelped and ducked back, firing a bolt from his blunderbuss that knocked the armored door halfway off its hinges. Jeremiah kicked her feet over her head, rolled upright, and threw herself behind the corner opposite him as lightning chewed up the hardwoods where she had just lain. "Commander," Patrick said with a sharp nod. He'd shed his coat, his white shirt was torn, his dark skin shone with exertion, and a spreading plotch of red marred his gold-brocaded Faraday vest, but he kept a firm grip on his aplomb. "Always glad to be of service." "Many thanks, Lieutenant," she whispered, raising her gun. "The good news first, sir." "It appears our computer has thwarted their alarm," Patrick said, and Jeremiah smiled. "We've a fair shot at catching the forces in the hangar unawares, but I must commend our foes in their marksmanship. Half the expedition lies unconscious, and the other half is in pitched battle to hold the conservatory's mansion. Further reinforcements are not guaranteed." "They never are," Jeremiah said. Patrick winced as he began turning the crank to recharge his weapon, and then Jeremiah's eyes narrowed at the suit on the blunderbuss discharge rod. "Pass it over," she said, pulling a silk scarf from her Faraday vest. "You'll ruin the chamber." Patrick hesitated, then threw the blunderbuss to her. "You're better with it anyway," he said, catching her cathode straw. He inspected the canister gauge and frowned, tapping it to double-check. "Only 3 shots? Where's your left-handed one?" "Tossed it," she said, pressing the brake to release the rod slowly. "Tube's cracked." "Damn Austrian toys," Patrick said. He watched her carefully clean the weapon, extending the discharge rod fully under the brass firing bell before wiping the rod's copper tip until it shone like her hair. "Good job polishing that rod. Pity a gentleman can't get that kind of attention. If your rod was copper-hard, spring-loaded, and shot lightning," Jeremiah said, rubbing the rest of the oil burnt off by the etheric discharge with a flourish and slipping the silk back into her vest, "gentlewoman would line up to give it a polish." "Touché," Patrick said, flicking the night lens of the spectacle down over his left eye. But when he ducked out to sight up the service stair, a quick blast from the attic shattered the lens, forcing him back behind the corner. "Dang it." He didn't say anything. "You all right?" Jeremiah said, turning up the crank to retract the discharge rod. "Yes," Patrick said, pulling off his spectacle in disgust. His cheek was twitching and bloody, but his eye was still sound. "Just hope our foes aren't invisible. No more than 8 shots between us. Should we chance it or wait for reinforcements?" But before Jeremiah could respond, a crushing headache struck her, a psychic message. The image of the owl and the falcon leapt to her mind. Young Chinese twins, one female, one male, both in elaborate formal dresses with namesake birds on their shoulders. They sat on twin thrones before the glowing dial of a vast spectroscope, clasping left and right hands in their habit when they spied the future. And on the glowing dial behind them, their precognitions were writ large, distorted images of the conservatory and the Baron, with some fell shadow looming closer and closer. "The hourglasses run out," the twins said, straight into her mind, their raw fear delivering far more urgency than the simple words of their message. "The stars align, the messenger approaches, and the order of the burning scarab is ready. If you would stop them, it must be now." The migraine passed, and Jeremiah opened her eyes. "The messenger approaches when the stars align," she said with horror. "I thought the Baron here to mount activate his stolen weapon, but that premonition sounds more like a foreign incursion." "Perhaps the weapon is a foreigner. Regardless, that prevision put the Baron in the heart of whatever disaster the twins want us to avert," Patrick said, kneading his brow. "Bloody telepaths. Glad they didn't send that head twister while you still lay on the landing." "Thank heaven for small favors," she said, fortifying herself. "The last thing Earth needed was another invasion of monsters from foreign stars. If he's calling down a monster, we've got to stop him before it gets started. Wind your braces, let's do this." They did not even round their corners before another fusillade drove them back. "Ammunition is clearly not their problem," Patrick said. There was another creak atop the stair, and he cocked his head. "Hear that? Like a spring drawing? Or a bow? Perhaps a 6-string? Jeremiah listened closely, then heard the sound again. It did indeed sound like the cranking of a bow with a 6-string crossbow. Not the most formidable etheric blaster, but with a bit of elbow grease, endlessly reloadable. Then she realized the implication of hearing that sound twice. "Maybe a pair of them," Jeremiah said, staring at the bit of cinder she could see behind the corner that gave Patrick cover. The soot streaks paralleled the railing. Impulsively, she flipped off the catch on the blunderbuss single-shot ratchet. "Just 5 shots. Let's make them count." and she slipped her goggles down over her eyes, making Patrick scowl. "Jeremiah, I know you love the look, but it's near pitch up there," he said. "You won't be able to aim. Now isn't the time." "It's never a bad time for goggles," she said, lining the blunderbuss up with the rail. "Draw their fire, then shield your eyes. Follow me up, as fast as I go. Ready? Now." Patrick ducked out, fired, then leapt back as a dozen energy bolts rained down the stair, squeezing his eyes tight as Jeremiah thrust her gun out and let loose. With a tea kettle scream and a blinding flash, the blunderbuss completely discharged, saturating the stair with etheric fire. Jeremiah leapt onto the stair, gritting her teeth as tendrils of foxfire toward her from the stair, the rail, the gas lights. She leapt towards the sparking door and kicked it wide open, swinging the butt of the blunderbuss straight into the chin of a walrus-mustached, waistcoated footman. The giant footman fell, 2 6-string crossbows clattering to the floor beside him. Jeremiah slung her